Hello everyone, let's continue with theme 4 and part 2 in theme 4. It's about again the literature review. Of course, in this part 2 of theme 4, we'll talk about 3 main points. First one, the sources of literature review. Next, we'll talk about the functions of literature review. And finally, we'll finish with how to conduct a literature review. Just from what we have presented in the previous presentations regarding literature review, we insist on the importance of literature review. It's a very important stage in any research study. Why? Because it can give very important insights, new ideas. It helps in developing your research study. Also, it can refine your research study. You can strengthen many parts of your research study. It can provide you with the essential, useful sources from the previous study. So this is all to say that a literature review is an important stage in any research process. Now, for today's presentation, let's talk about these points, and we start with the sources of literature review. That means from where we can take information regarding our research topic. Generally, we take information from different sources, a multitude of sources, from books. And when we talk about books today, we talk about two types of books. We have the soft copies, e-books that are available on internet. And of course, we have the hard copies of books that are available in libraries. Of course, textbooks also are important sources that we can use to have any useful information in relation to our research topic. We have periodicals and journals, very important source. The articles that are available, of course, on the net or in hard copies of scientific journals in university libraries. Of course, the theses and dissertations, also they are important also sources from which we can find any useful information that may help us in our study or studies. Abstracts. What is an abstract? An abstract, it is that summary of the study that we may find in theses and dissertations. It is it appears in the opening part of the thesis or dissertation, and in this, it's generally drafted only on one page. In the abstract presents the study in terms of the research problem, the research questions, the research hypotheses, the research aims, the methodology used in a study, the findings, and also the implications, recommendations that any researcher may come up with them at the end, by the end of his or her research work. So an abstract may summarize a whole study. That's why reading abstracts may help any researcher to get useful information that may help him or her in his or her research study, his or her research investigation. Also handbooks and guides and on the internet or on the web sources. But when talking about sources, generally we have to be careful in terms of what sources we should rely on them. Generally, we have two types of sources. We have the primary sources and the secondary sources. What is recommended by methodology and methodologists is to rely more on primary sources rather than on secondary sources. According to some conventions, when it comes to use sources, whether primary or secondary, it is recommended that 2/3 of the sources, they should be primary sources, and 1/3 of the sources that you rely on them, they should be primary sources. The difference between primary sources and secondary sources is that primary sources are original sources. Secondary sources, they are sources in which we find explanations, discussions, interpretations of other researchers and other research investigation. That's why when opting for a primary source, the information is more credible from when we opt for a secondary source. Now let's talk about the functions of literature review. Generally, when we talk about literature review, we are talking about drawing a conceptual frame of reference for the contemplated research. So literature review, of course, provides a theoretical conceptual framework for your study. And it also gives us an understanding of the status of research in the problem area. It shows some clues to the research approach, the method, the instrumentation, and data analysis. And it tells us sometimes the probability of success and significance of findings. So these are the functions and the main functions of literature review. These functions, they show the utility, the usefulness, and the importance of literature review in any research study, in any research investigation. Now, how to conduct a literature review? Conducting a literature review is very systematic. It's a very structured process. It goes through stages. Okay, stage one, generally, it's to try to gain some impression of what the sources is about. Through scheming the sources, we can, because at the beginning we may come with a great deal of sources. So it's up to us from the beginning to filter, if we can say, to choose what we think is more relevant to our study. At the beginning, we may gather a great deal of sources, and then we have to select. So when we talk about stage one, it's the selection stage. We select what is generally what is relevant, very close to our study, and what is not really relevant close, we put it apart. In stage two, try to locate the required information. Now, selection, next to the selection, we have to locate the needed information. Because when we read any source, we are looking for a given specific information that we needed in our study. And in stage three, try to look for the answers or conclusions the author has drawn. That means, generally, in relation to our study, we look for some answers to some questions we are raising, and some conclusions of previous studies that are helpful for our study. And in stage four, after we locate, after we find some answers to some questions we have raised, some conclusions that are useful for us, then we need to go to the stage that is very important in the literature review, which is to record the data. Generally, when talking about recording data, we do that in the note form. In the note form, we don't give details, and we have to be very careful here. We have to put everything when we take, when we record. We have to mention the reference from which we have took the source. That means we have to mention the author's name, last name, generally the last name, the year of publication, and sometimes when, when we record data, sometimes we record the data based on two processes. Either when we paraphrase, we reword, we rewrite other ideas of other works in our words. So here we don't need to put the page number. But when we take and record information wholly as they are and as they appear in the original text, in the original source, here we need to mention the page from the beginning, so that when it comes time to use this information in our research work, we will find all the required information about the source. The names of the author, last name, the year of publication of the source, and the page number or the pages number of the source. And then when it comes to use them, we can use them appropriately. So recording is the last stage in the literature review, and it is very important stage when conducting any research work. So this is all about this part and this presentation regarding literature review. Thank you very much indeed.